Hey everybody, and welcome back to a not necessarily cracking packs, but let's open up some interesting product, and that is Keyforge. I've been trying to get my hands on this stuff for quite some time. It's been sold out everywhere. I know a couple of my other MTG creators on Twitter have been talking about it quite frequently and regularly, and I wanted to take a look at it myself. So when I was out and about doing my One of Everything series, I actually found a shop that had a whole brick of this. So I figured, you know what, since I can't find it anywhere, I'm just gonna buy the brick. So I bought the whole brick, so that I could make sure I had it. Now we might give some of these away. I don't know exactly what I'm gonna do yet with everything, but let's get into it and let's open up. Let's open up at least one for now and see what we find, and maybe we'll open a second one on this video. I don't know. I honestly don't know what my plan is. I'm just gonna I bought the starter kit as well at the same time, and I didn't do an opening video for that because I wanted to open it and play it to see what it was all about before I did this opening video, because I wanted to at least have a little bit of knowledge of how the game is played and that kind of stuff before I before I did the video on it. So that's kind of, there you go, there you go, see? And so now, the way this works is that these are all unique. These are all unique decks. None of them have been done, none of them have been registered, all that whatnot. So, we're going to just open up one for now and see what happens. We're just going to open up one now and see what happens. So, let's get right into it. And I'll talk about how the game is played and all that kind of stuff while we're going over the cards. So let's go there and see. So we've got Kurum, the Guildhall Explorer. And so these symbols up along the top here are the houses that the deck is made up of. So you've got Logos, Shadow, and Untamed. So this is Untamed, this is Logos, and this is Shadow. Okay? So the way it works is each player has a unique deck. That deck is entirely unique to... There is a tab on these. Or maybe not? Maybe there isn't a tab? Okay. Well, they've put the pull tab, but they haven't made the cut. Luckily, I can pull these apart without too much issue. So you've got, this is your like leader card, and what it is on the other side, it's got the deck list. Okay, and I'm assuming you can see here, like the stars, I'm assuming are your rares. I'm assuming. I don't know. So I'm assuming the stars are the rares and the diamonds are the uncommons. Because how many diamonds have you got here? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6 diamonds, and you've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 stars. So maybe the... Wait, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay, 7 diamonds and 6 stars. So I'm assuming that the diamonds are like the uncommons, and that the stars are the rares. I don't know, because I didn't read up on that before I did this video. But so the way that it's played is essentially each player has their own unique deck, and you've got this card here like so, and you've got your deck, and you determine who's going to go first randomly between the two of you, and the first player draws 7 cards, and the second player draws 6 cards. On the first player's turn, they can only play one card. They can only play or discard or activate one card, and that's it on their first turn. From that point forward, you can play and activate and discard as many cards as you want in a turn, as long as they are all the house you pick for the turn. So your steps are, your first step is to forge a key if you have enough ember. It takes 6 ember to make a key. The objective of the game is to forge 3 keys. Okay? So you forge 3 keys to win the game. Each key takes 6 ember. So you need 18 ember total to win the game. Okay? So, once you've forged a key, if you can, you then pick a house. You pick one of these 3 houses. Then you can play or activate any cards you have that are of the chosen house. So, we'll take a look through the deck here, and we'll go through the checklist here, and then we'll talk about the rest of how things work out with the playing. Okay, so of course we've got Untamed first. So we've got a Niffle Ape, which is just a common, I believe. Yep. We've got a Murmook, which is also just a common. So you can say Niffle Ape is attacking, ignores taunt, and elusive. So that matters because taunt prevents you from attacking adjacent creatures, and elusive says the first time they're attacked each turn, they don't take damage. So if you ignore those, you can kill it with Niffle Ape. The Murmook is interesting because it makes your opponent's keys cost 1 extra ember to forge. So now instead of 6, they cost 7. Okay. Then we have a Dust Pixie, which is another common. Okay. It's just a 1 power creature, but it gives you 2 ember when you play it. So that's not too bad. Then we have a Dew Fairy, which is also just another common. But it has elusive, and it has Reap, gain 1 ember. So when you reap, the reap action gives you an ember. So if you reap with this creature, you get 2 ember. So there's that. Now, we've got Word of Returning, which is actually a rare card by the looks of things. So Word of Returning is deal 1 damage to each enemy creature for each ember on it. Return all ember from those creatures to your pool. The reason this is interesting is because there are cards in this game that capture ember from your opponent. And when it captures an ember, it means it takes one of their ember from their pool and puts it on that card. So that's where this comes in. It does damage equal to the number of ember on those cards. And then that ember that they've captured comes back to you. So, pretty neat. Now we have Troop Call, which looks like an uncommon. And Troop Call is return each friendly Niffle creature from your discard pile and from play to your hand. So you're returning your Niffle creatures to your hand from discard and play. Niffle creatures are these guys. You can see this has got a beast Niffle. So he's a beast, but he's also a Niffle. Whereas this crab is just a beast. And this guy's just a fairy, and this guy's just a fairy. So, in fact, this Troop Call right now doesn't look very good for us because we only have 1 Niffle. Right? So, unless we have some other Niffles in here, not so super amazing. Now we have Scout, which is a rare. Scout is a card that you play, and it says, for the remainder of the turn, up to 2 friendly creatures gain Skirmish. Then fight with those creatures 1 at a time. Skirmish means when they attack, they don't take damage. So that's what Skirmish means. Skirmish means when they take the attack action, they don't take damage. So you can essentially swing into something for 3 damage, and whatever their creature is doesn't do damage back to you, which is kind of interesting. Okay, we've got Nocturnal Maneuver, which is another common. Okay, and this is a exhaust up to 3 creatures. So exhausting is essentially like tapping in Magic cards. Now we've got Lost in the Woods. Another common card. Choose 2 friendly creatures and 2 enemy creatures. Shuffle each of the chosen creatures into its owner's deck. And we have 2 of those. So we were given 2 Lost in the Woods, which is kind of interesting. Now we've got a Key Charge, which is lose 1 ember. If you do, you may forge a key at current cost. Now, the reason this matters is because you can only forge keys at the beginning of your turn in step 1. So at the beginning of your turn, if you have 6 ember, you can forge a key. That's the only time you can forge a key. So if you gain enough ember throughout the rest of your turn to forge a key, you have to wait until your next turn to forge it. But if you have this, you can play it and forge a key as long as you have enough Ember still after losing the one. Now, we have another rare here. Fertility Chant. Holy moly. So this gives you 4 Ember, but it also gives your opponent 2 Ember. Wow, that's crazy. Alright, so that's our Untamed cards. So we'll go over a little bit in detail after we look at the rest of the cards here. So here we have Shadow. We've got an uncommon Silent Dagger. Creature gains Reap, deal 4 damage to a flank creature. Wow, that is pretty intense. I wonder if that's actually a rare, or is that just an uncommon? I don't know. It seems rare-ish. So when you play this, you get an Ember, and then when you take a Reap action, you gain an Ember, but it also lets you deal 4 damage to a flank creature. Flank creatures are the creatures that are on the outside edges of the battle. We've got a Sneak Lifter, or Sneak Lifter, however you want to pronounce it. I think it's like a Sneak Lifter, because it looks like he's got a snack there. And this takes control of an enemy artifact while under your control. It does not belong to one. If it does not belong to one of your houses, it is considered House Shadow. So that's just that's a rare, which is pretty nice. Then we have a common here, Silvertooth, which is just a thief. It says enters play ready, so you are able to use it the turn it comes in. Essentially haste. We have 2 of those. We have 3 of those. So this deck has 3 Silvertooths. That's pretty crazy. Lots of hasty things. Now we have a common here called Dodger, which is interesting. It's a 5 power creature, but when it fights, it steals 1. So that's pretty nice. Then we have here an uncommon, Old Bruno, which is elusive, and when you play it, you capture 3. So here's that capture I was talking about. So what capture does is it puts 3 of their Ember on this card. You don't get to use it, but you've captured it. So like it's on this guy. Now we have 2 of those. We got 2 Old Brunos? My goodness. Alright. Then we have a Naughty the Thief, which is an elusive with, again, an action to steal 1. So it can't attack and steal 1, but it can just do an action to steal. Then we have another common, Pawn Sacrifice. So sacrifice a friendly creature. If you do, deal 3 damage to 2 creatures. Then we have another common in Shadow, which is Ghostly Hand. It says play. If your opponent has exactly 1 Ember, you steal it. So you get 2 Ember, because that's what's here, and then you steal 1 from them if they have exactly 1. Then our last Shadow card is Bait and Switch, which says play. If your opponent has more Ember than you, steal 1. Repeat this card's effect if your opponent still has more than you. So me and my friend who were playing, when we were talking about it, we were thinking about this. We were wondering if this card repeats over and over and over until the second clause never happens. Because it doesn't say repeat only the first part of this card. It says repeat this card's effect if your opponent still has more, which is the whole thing. So essentially you play it. If your opponent has, let's say your opponent has 5 Ember and you have none, you play this, you steal 1, they now have 4, you have 1. Well, you repeat. You steal 1, they now have 3 and you have 2. Well, they still have more, so you repeat again. Now you have 3 and they have 2. So now it doesn't repeat. That's how I think it works, but again, someone can correct me below in the comments if they know. Alright, so now we're on to Logos, and our first card is a rare. And the first one we have is Transposition Sandals. And this creature gains actions. Swap this creature with another friendly creature in the battle line. You may use that other creature this turn. So this essentially allows you to exhaust your creature to shift your battle line around. And the reason that matters is we'll get into that when I talk about the battle lines here at the end of the video. Experimental Therapy is an uncommon card, looks like. This creature belongs to all houses. Wow. Play. Stun and exhaust this creature. So you're basically doing some sort of scientific mutation to that man. But then that creature becomes every house, so you can activate it no matter which house you pick, which is kind of cool. Now we have another uncommon, Novu Archaeologist. So it's a 4-power creature with an action that says archive a card from your discard pile. We'll talk about archive in a minute. So then we've got 5. A 5-power creature called Doc Bookton, which when you reap with it, it draws a card. Pretty cool. That's just a common. Now we have a rare here called Spangler Box. This one is an item that says action, purge a creature in play. If you do, your opponent gains control of Spangler Box. If Spangler Box leaves play, return to play all creatures purged by Spangler Box. That's interesting. So purging is essentially like exiling. So like when you exile something in Magic, it's similar to purge. So this lets you purge a creature, and then they get this, and then they can purge a creature, and then you get it, and then you can purge a creature, and so then this can fill up with a bunch of stuff, and then if it ever blows up, all of those things come back, which is kind of interesting. We have another common here, Library of Babel. So let's draw a card. It's just an artifact that lets you draw a card. Now we have another common, Wild Wormhole, which lets you play the top card of your deck. And what that means is it lets you play the top card of your deck, but it doesn't matter what house it is. So, like, if you are playing Logos and you play this card and you flip, like this card, you get to play it even though it's not the same house. Our next card is Fogify, which lets your opponent cannot use creatures to fight on their next turn. So it's kind of like a fog. It's a fog card. Prevents combat damage next turn. Now, it also prevents them from fighting, which means if they have any abilities that trigger when they fight, they can't do those. So that's also a little bit more beneficial. So we have two of those. Then we got a common again here, Effervescent Principle, or Effervescent Principle. Play, each player loses half their ember, rounding down the loss. Gain 1 chain. Chain is an interesting thing. We'll talk about that as well. Then we have another one of those. So we have two of those as well. Then we have an uncommon, Dimension Door, which says play for the remainder of the turn. Any ember you would gain from reaping is stolen from your opponent instead. So that's our deck. I don't know if that's good or bad, to be honest, at this point, because I haven't played enough to know. The interesting thing that I will talk about is that so far, all the decks I have played with, which has only been one deck so far with Logos has been a little underwhelming for me. At least from the aspect of the decks that I have played. It seems like it has a lot of stuff that is about drawing cards and, you know, maybe expanding your board a bit. But like, for instance, this Dimension Door, right? It says if you would reap this turn, you steal it from your opponent, which is cool. Stealing seems to be very prevalent in this game, and it seems to be a very good mechanic because it essentially removes the ember from your opponent and gives it to you so that it's now yours. It prevents them from making a key, possibly, but also puts you closer to making a key. So stealing seems very good. The problem with something like this is that to be able to use reaping if you pick Logos to play this card to reap, you have to have creatures in this house that can reap. Well, if we look at the cards that came from this house, we've got action, 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 item, item, creature, creature, upgrade, upgrade. So we only have two. We have two creatures. So like this card seems not great in Logos, because unless you have a way to activate your other creatures when doing Logos, the best you're going to do is steal two, which is this. That means that this does nothing else for you, right? Now, that being said, we do have this experimental therapy, which would allow us to turn one of our other creatures into a creature that is essentially Logos. So now you could possibly have three creatures. Well, that seems not terrible, but it seems like it could, like for a card like this, you need more creatures in Logos. And I just don't see it. I haven't seen it. I've played two decks with Logos. They both had this Dimension Door card. This card seems to either not, like this card seems good if you had the creatures to support it. Logos does not appear to have the creatures to support this type of mechanic, at least from what I've seen. Now, that's not necessarily, I mean, all the decks are random. There's a lot of cards that I haven't seen, so maybe it does have. Maybe there is a deck out there where this card is just bonkers good for Logos, right? But I'm just not seeing it. I just haven't seen it in this. I haven't seen it in this game so far. So there's our deck. There's, you know, I would say that I really enjoy Shadow. They seem to be very good. Like the stealing, like I said, is very powerful. Stealing seems like a very good mechanic. Now, that being said, this Shadow doesn't have enough steal in my opinion. It has one here, one here, one here, and that's it. The rest of this is all damage or do some other evasion type stuff, right? Untamed seems to be like your big, beefy, kind of like Beastie Boys. That being said, like this deck, so like this has 4 creatures in it. So most of your creatures are showing up in Shadow, right? You've got a large number of actions here. So the way the game works is, let's say it's like a couple turns into the game and we've got one of these guys, and let's say we've got this guy, sure, like nothing super crazy fancy, right? And then like let's say we've got this guy, right? And then like maybe we're lucky enough that we have like Doc on the table or something like that, right? Okay, and then you have a hand of 6 cards, right? Because you always draw up at the end of your turn. So what this is called is this is called your battle line. Okay, so the creatures on the flank are these 2. So these guys get affected by things that do stuff to flank creatures. So for instance, this card that does 4 damage to a flank creature would deal it to one of these 2, right? On your turn, if you pick your house, so let's say on my turn I pick Shadow. That means I can only activate these 2 creatures. So I can't do anything with these 2 unless I have a way to turn them into Shadow or activate them by using a card in Shadow to allow these to do something this turn. So what you can do on this turn is I can attack or I can reap. Or if either of these creatures have an action, I can do that. Now that being said, none of them have an action, right? So if, say I had this in my hand, I could play this, and it's an upgrade, so I could put it on this guy, right? And that says, when you reap, deal 4 damage. So then I could be like, well, I reap with this, I gain an ember, and I do 4 damage to one of your creatures, right? That might then make me want to attack with this into the creature that just took 4 damage to make sure I kill it, if it's like, say, a 5 or 6 power creature, right? Because then I lose this guy, but at the same time, at least I get rid of a big threat off the board that could kill, like, Doc Bookton, right? So that's interesting, because then you still gain the ember from reaping, but you also still deal damage. So like the way the game is played is very simplistic, very easy. You have, let's see, do we have artifacts? We do have some artifacts, right? So the way the board is set up is you have your creatures here, you have like your dude here, and you have like your deck here like this. Do we have any artifacts? I know we have some. We must have some. Yeah, we definitely have one. Yeah, here, let's use the library, for instance. Okay, so the way you would do is your deck would be here. Your creatures are here in a line, right? And then this line can only move like this. They all have to move together, right? But you can put creatures, when you play new creatures, you can put them on either end. You can't put them in the middle. It's not like Hearthstone where you could like push and put it in the middle, right? It doesn't work. Right? You have to put it on either end. Okay? Now the artifact line is back here, and this is just where you like activate your artifacts, because artifacts are generally things that just have abilities, like actions that you can use. So the game is interesting. The game is definitely a lot of fun. I would definitely recommend trying it. If you can pick up the starter kit, it teaches you how to play. And not only that, but like it also gives you 2 decks that are pre-made. So everyone that buys the starter kit gets these 2 decks that are pre-made. Those 2 decks that are pre-made allow you to sort of learn the game without using too many of the advanced mechanics. Now, we were talking about some of the things here because we did have some stuff, right, that was interesting. I think it was in the logo stuff? This. So like this. And we had a thing that archived things. This guy. Okay, so something else we learned when we were playing, when me and my friend were playing for the first time, was that there are a lot of abilities on some of these more advanced cards that were not in the starter 2 decks that aren't explained anywhere unless you go and look at the rulebook online. The rulebook is not included in this starter kit. Why that is, I don't know. Why they didn't do that is very questionable to me. Putting it online, I get it. It's now accessible to everybody, whether they were able to get the product or not. But at the same time, why didn't they? Like, they designed it in a PDF format that looks like it was designed to be printed and put into a booklet. Like, the pages are colored, they have pictures and stuff on them. Like, if you're gonna just make a PDF of all the instructions, why make it look fancy? Right? Unless you were planning to do something with it, in my opinion. Now, I mean, maybe they just wanted to make it look fancy so that it looks professional when you look at it online. But really, all you're going to do with it is you're going to go in and you're going to search for the keywords. So the keywords like archive and chain, and learn what those things mean. So you have to actually have internet available to make sure you can look up these cards. Because if you go to sit down to play this, like at the cottage or out while you're camping, and you find a card that you don't know what it does, if you don't have internet, you're not going to know. You're not going to know, right? So that seems a little bit weird to me. Now, of course, those things and like those rules and that kind of stuff will get picked up over time. And people will learn like, okay, that's just what that means. Okay, because I've played the game enough, I know, right? And fine. The same way Magic is, right? But if you remember in Magic, when they put a keyword on a card for the first time, they put in brackets what it does. Maybe that would have been a good idea to do here. Who knows? But anyway. So let's talk about archive and chain, just as examples. So archive is essentially like an exile pile. So it allows you to exile cards from your discard in front of your deck. So you'd end up putting the cards here. So like, for instance, say this was in my discard pile, and I activate this guy. I can then put this here, like this. It's now in my archive pile, okay? The archive pile can be picked up during step 2 after you've picked a house. So when you pick a house each turn, you can then pick up this pile and add it to your hand. Whenever you want, right? So essentially you could start exiling or archiving cards into this pile that are the same type. Right, and then that way, one turn you could pick the house and have a good turn of that house. Right, being able to play a bunch of cards, maybe do a bunch of actions, that kind of stuff. So that's kind of interesting. Chaining. There's a card that came in the starter kit, but it's not given to you with each of these decks. Here's another problem: if you don't have the starter kit and you don't have the chain card, how do you know? Where is it? Do I have to have a phone app or something to be able to keep track of my chains without that starter kit? If I wasn't lucky enough to get the starter kit, how would I know what chaining is or how to keep track of it, right? So the way the chain works is it's actually a little card, and the card is a tracker. And as you move up the chain, you get worse detriments to you. And what that is like when you have one or more chains. I think it's up to 5. When you have 1 to 5 chains, you actually draw one less card at the end of your turn. So at the end of your turn, you draw up to 6. Well, you would actually only draw up to 5 if you have a chain, right? But then once you draw up to 5, you lose a chain. So like gaining 1 chain, not a big deal because you are going to end up losing a chain, right? But if you play a bunch of cards that give you chains, you end up moving up that track pretty fast, and then if you get over 5 now, you get 2 less cards, right? But you only lose 1 chain every round. So, there's some interesting stuff there. Anyway, this has been a little discussion. I know it's been a long video. I apologize, but it was more just sort of like my first impressions and feelings about Keyforge. It seems like an interesting game. It seems like a lot of fun. We had a lot of fun playing. It definitely seems like it still has a few things that could have been ironed out a little bit better. Not necessarily from a play style, but like from just an availability type of format of the information for each of these things. Obviously now, like, we can't compare it to Magic. Magic's been around for 25 years. If you go back to Magic when it was first released, there was lots of stuff that wasn't done right per se, or wasn't available information-wise, and they had to make the whole rule set and all this nonsense. So I think, like, it will get there. I think it will get there. It's definitely interesting. The unique decks, the unique deck thing where every deck is different and unique is interesting. It's an interesting concept. I'll be interesting to see where they go with it moving forward. Like, is this going to be one of those things where, like, they release it, the game does well, they don't have anything that they can do, because, like, it's like they don't know how to manage tournaments with it, and they don't know how to make it competitive, because the other thing, too, from what I've been hearing, is that you could open a box and get a random deck that just has no synergy or any way to do anything. And so you just can't, like, the deck almost just does nothing, and so you're like, this deck, I just paid for this deck, and it's the only deck I have, and I can't win a game ever. And you're like, okay, well, interesting. So I mean, it's a possibility that you could get a deck that's just full of a bunch of junk that doesn't work together, which is interesting. So we'll see what they do. We'll see what they do with it. It seems like a fun game. I really enjoyed playing it with my buddy. We only played 2 games, so I need to get a couple more games under my belt and see how it goes. Possibly we'll film some games and put them up here on the channel. Let me know below in the comments what you thought of this video. It's just like a little bit of sort of like my first thoughts, I guess, is kind of the idea. We opened up a unique deck. We talked about the deck. We talked about the cards. We kind of showed off the basic rules. Yeah. Give it a chance. Try it out. If you get a chance to try it, like at your LGS or something like that, if they're running like a demo night or something like that of it, definitely check it out. It's interesting. It's definitely an interesting game. Anyway, thank you so much, everybody, for watching. I've been your host, MrBevers. And as always, may your pulls ever be better.